Saturation.
When we arrived here, we arrived as a spirit being. We entered this physical form at the top of the head, where the hair grows in the spiral.
Everywhere, and then the most her part is here on my rib. She's gonna grab it, and she's gonna try to crack it. She's gonna move it around, and that's what makes me.
Because I thought the one thing you say about a myth is that there's some truth in there, no matter how bizarre they may seem.
The girl he was dating and the boy I was dating cheated on us with each other and got together.
On the ghetto streets where y'all at, on the ass where the jeeps go past, and in the coast where the seats go back, at the parties where it be so packed, and the atmosphere be so black, and them black things be so fat.
Storytelling.
We are all telling stories constantly, all the time. A lot of my literal storytelling takes place on stage. As actors, the most important part of telling the story often is empathizing with the character so that you are justly telling their story and going after their objectives in the way that they would. In situations where you're portraying a character that you may disagree with, you have to figure out what their true emotions are and what their true intentions are and figure out ways to justify what they want that may not be what you want. As a person, I am participant in how other people are viewed. As a human being, my actions contribute themselves to the culture of human beings. As a man, my actions contribute themselves to the culture of being a man. As a black person, and so on and so forth. So culture for me is sort of another word for storytelling. What is the story behind a people is what their culture is. That's a responsibility in being well-spoken, in being a just person. All of these things are part of the story of what is a human being. In being creative, in being passionate, all of these parts of me, someone will see that and say, oh, that's what black people are. Everything I do creates that story of who people are. That gave me a sense of power, a sense of hope to tell that story of this is what men can be like, and this is what black people can be like. And then it extends farther into this is what human beings can be like. I have certain morals that I believe in, and in acting those out in my daily life, I feel like I'm somehow shaping the culture of human beings, even as one person. I think there's definitely power in the story that has been abused. A lot of us didn't learn about Columbus being a dickhead until we got to college level. Columbus raped and pillaged and did all these things, but before, people talked about these people and made them heroes. The European context to make people heroes who weren't. And they don't mention that slaves were beaten and raped and misfigured in that language. They say they were beaten up, or they say they were coerced. At the center of a story is a message. Stories are told to educate someone, and stories need to be relatable. It's intentional when you're telling a story, and then that's what makes you an artist, storyteller. And I think the difference as an actor is just that you're on stage or you're behind a camera versus, around a fire. But I think those people are still storytellers, they're orators. A story has a philosophy ingrained in the center. The seed of a story is its philosophy. A tree which flourishes is the body of a story. Its branches and leaves are the spectacle which Aristotle spoke of. They communicate a story visually. The way its branches run together and its leaves rustle in the wind engage us orally Its fruit teaches us through taste and its textures through sensation. Aroma obviously lends itself to smell. The seed at this point is unseen. It is forgotten. But when any of us encounter a tree, we still know inherently that there is a seed there when we encounter a story. Whether conscious or not, there is a philosophy. The philosophy of a tree is life, and for me, life is the highest form of storytelling.
The stories that I like to hear is basically from my father, because he tells very good stories. Well, sometimes he tells them in like a deep voice, but sooner or later he'll just start to do it higher. He loves to ball up his hands and pretend he's mad. Like, for real. One time my grandpa told stories, and my dad he just thought I'm teaching my dad, and that's how my dad is trying to teach me.
Hey friend, it's been a while. I miss your face, that dashing smile. I heard she broke your heart, tore it apart, left you in the dark.
Hey boy, I did love you, but I am not missing you. It wasn't me, not meant to be. If it was, it would have lasted.
After 14 years of not being able to go back, I finally last summer was able to go through Lebanon to Syria to visit my family and understand where I come from. To meet 100 people within the span of a month that tell you that you're their family, and then they love you and then implement all these values on you. You're in this weird spot where you're like, whoa, dude, y'all don't understand, but I'm culturally incompatible. Telling me shit I need to learn how to cook or else I won't ever be able to marry. Y'all don't understand, I'm probably gonna marry a chef. I can't tell the difference between butter and cheese. Anyway, I'm in Syria, dead ass. I get food poisoning. I'm in the hospital, so I get the internal side of the medicine in the Syrian ER. Interesting, really abysmal, very heartbreaking. After that incident, I was in a car accident, and I kind of ripped my head open. I was in the ER, and I'm not in any pain. This young doctor comes up to me, and he's like, I don't fucking know what he's saying, dude. He's speaking in Arabic, saying these fancy terms. And I tell him, I'm from America. I don't understand English. I don't understand Arabic so good. Please dumb it down. What are you trying to say? He stunts on me. He's like, oh shit, this is an American girl. So he's obviously, he didn't say that, but I can tell that it happens in their minds. He's like, I have to cut your hair. And I was like, is there any other way, dude? You are not about to cut this hair. You know how long I've been growing it for. Fuck you, man. Then he dead ass rolls his eyes and walks away from me. Looking at myself in third person, I was like, Heba, don't be a fucking bitch. Let this doctor do what he thinks he should do to you. Lie down on that table and let that boy cut your hair. Because also, that would be a cool fucking story. So I'm on this table, and he's numbing me. He's telling me what he's gonna do. And I'm like, holy shit, this plastic surgeon's sexy as fuck. I'm looking at his eyes and shit, and I'm like, Whoa. This is one beautiful man. The color, it was like a warm, intense, caramel, yellow, hazel. It was so beautiful, dude. I was feeling all the feels, and he was cutting my head open, stitching it together, and his arm was right in front of my face. Holy shit, that animal instinct. Like, I wanted to lick it or bite it or some shit. I was like, how am I supposed to keep my hands to myself? I wanted to just I wanted to suck on some of those hairs. Anyway. A week after, I remember I was in Damascus for like a vacation within the vacations. And I was like, I'm gonna find this bitch on Facebook. How long did it take me to find him on Facebook? Like a minute. My friend requested and he started messaging me, and we messaged and we went on 2 dates and we talked for like 2 months every single day, video call, and then I fucking ended it because I got bored. I was letting my horniness make me fall for him emotionally, but that's a good experience because you get to see this discrepancy in later relationships. This was a good first one for me, but he's a troubled man. Every Syrian boy, every Syrian young man is troubled. It's become part of us now, to have a shitty story. So at the end of the day, he deserves someone that can support him emotionally, someone who understands the struggle, And I will never be able to provide that being someone so privileged.
In my experience, my dreams are my body screaming something at me. I need to be told something, and I don't want to know it, and my body will not let me forget it. You're in a disembodied car, and you're floating through the ocean, and the door's open, and whatever, and you tell someone else that you're hiding 7 layers worth of whatever your dream is trying to tell you. You could have, feelings about, what is a car, what is floating in the ocean make me feel like, but you're not telling that to people, or if you are, there are so many more layers of every single moment of a dream that to, show other people your dreams is almost deceitful. And I think the method with which we get content is part of the content. You can't watch Fox News without hearing Fox News' voice telling you the story. Private reading, whether that be reading by yourself in a book or in an article or whatever, you hear that person's voice, but you're reading it in your own voice. And that changes the impact of the story. Every story you tell reeks of your bad breath, kills with whatever ails you. I think that's very interesting, the idea of deceit in storytelling. The good storytelling teacher, good writing teacher will tell you, you want to introduce an idea in the beginning, you deviate from that idea to tell your story, you bring back that idea in the end. It tells you what to listen for, and then at the end it's like, see, aha, this is what I told you I was going to talk about, and I talked about it. And there is a lot of deceit in performance, because you create it to perform. But in reality, when you're actually performing, that is the most honest you can ever be. Whether or not you're putting a performative aspect on it or not, you're performing it as truthfully and as genuinely as you can on stage, because you know that the audience can always smell a lie. You know, you hear my voice, you can hear my sincerity, I speak with passion, you know I'm being honest. When you don't hear my voice, if I were to write you a text message, a good writer will show you the tone. You still get those biases, but you are under the illusion that this comes from some non-biased party. Although we know it's written by these individuals, or theoretically it's written by these individuals, we look at it and we accept it as coming from that higher source, that God, that emotionally inspired, spiritually inspired those writers to write that story. We see it as non-biased third-party fact, or at least if you're a believer, you look at that as non-biased third-party fact. You don't look at that as like Mark wrote the book of Mark. And I'm not one who thinks that the rise of technology is necessarily like stealing away our humanity or our emotion or our feeling or our memory, but I do feel that our receiving of the story is deeply changing. We have a lower attention span, for example. We're more visual. Do we not want to hear stories? That will never be true. But the way we want to receive the stories, that is always changing. And I think it will continue to change, and I think it is a storyteller's job to find a way to keep those stories alive regardless.
I'm going to have a story to tell you. One day, there was a little girl that was walking down the sidewalk. Then she heard a twig snap, and she turned over because she was in the woods. And she's like, what's that noise? But then she finally found out that it was nothing. So she kept on walking, and then she heard it again. And she's like, what is that noise? But then she turned around, and there was something behind her in the shadows. And she's like, what is that? Then she went a little closer, and she heard a big roar. She ran, and it kept on chasing her. And then she finally found a house that was empty. And then she went in, and she closed her eyes and prayed to God, saying, please be over, please be over. But then she heard knocking on the door. She opened the door, and it was her grandmother. And then she saw a zipper. Then she unzipped the zipper and she screamed. It was a dark shadow, and she ran into the closet where her grandmother was hiding too. She had a basket in her hand, and inside of it there was cookies. And then they both ate cookies. And then after they ate the cookies, they went out there, and the dark shadow was holding more cookies and asked, would you like a cookie? And then they went to the table that was in the kitchen. Then they all had a good time, a wonderful time, having tea and cookies and milk. And the end.
Words have never come easily to me. I'm not the best storyteller in the traditional sense of the word, though I've always appreciated those who have a talent for weaving words together. The way I most effectively tell my story is through my way of being. I think that the essence of our own lives and our own stories show themselves through how we navigate and how we interact with the world and people around us.
When I listen to people's stories, I can hear their feelings. That's what comes through to me. I don't use words as much as I use, creativity. And that's how I believe I tell my story. That's how I pull things together that I love. I don't feel like I owe my stories to anybody. If they can enrich somebody or affect them in some positive way, I hope I would be willing to share that with them, but I don't think it's owed. It's just sort of a gift.
The Mecca my mother was forced to have was this land, which is run by a woman-hating man. He cleanses impurities with a travel ban to ensure that we go back to the land of sand. He condemns my mother tongue and its religion, so it doesn't make a difference that I'm actually Christian. It only matters that my skin shows submission, when the real anguish is in my mind's own prison.
I've recounted a story about a time that I felt the most like myself, and if I were to go back into that moment, that story doesn't look like what it looks like now to me. That truth is changing even for myself. If there's anything that makes me feel super alive, it's seeing people like dancing and enjoying the moment feels like a story to me. I don't know how many times I've just cried when I've been around my family and everyone's just kind of making music and dancing. My grandma had a shop in Ethiopia where she made tej, which is like a traditional honey wine. Tej is known for hitting you really hard. So she'd be kicking these men out of this bar. This old woman just running this shit. It just seemed like she was like a boss. Yeah, there's just like a bunch of little things. So like when she was still in Ethiopia, there was this man that like called her over on the street or whatever and read her future and was basically like, you're gonna have a life really, really far away from here. And the fact that that's something that's stuck with her is also something that's kind of stuck with me. I was like out here living, I think she came in like 93 maybe, or like late 80s, early 90s with like $10 and worked her way up from there, which is wild and makes me feel inadequate. So, yeah, those are stories that have stuck with me.
What's up, bro?
What's going on?
Not much.
We've been
eating some chicken.
And some tortellini.
Tortellini is chicken.
Mm-hmm.
It's good chicken, too.
Some bomb chicken.
Bomb. I didn't make it either. It's the best part.
Makes it delicious.
Yes, it does.
But that's in and of itself a story. Just niggas eating some chicken.
That's a fact. How the chicken got on the plate.
How the chicken fucking lived its life. It's a fucking story. For one, some people just aren't open to understanding that there are stories that you're either not going to understand or that you're not going to know about. Even if you don't know about them, it's not like they're forbidden or whatever.
Like
it's not like they're some untouchable thing. It's just something out of your scope.
The story
and
of our
doesn't mean it
past.
has to immediately get in there. There's nothing to like, at least in my opinion, not a lot to fear from someone's story. It's just a matter of, okay, your story is how you got to where you are now. Your story is kind of like a trailing light. So wherever you go is where your story goes. People like to say, oh, you don't know my story, when they haven't added to their story in years. Or they haven't done anything to really develop their own storyline. And that's why they get defensive when people say, oh, they're not moving. That means their story is over, or that means that there's an assumption about that story. Once people feel like, oh, why are you assuming you know my story? You don't you have no idea who I am. That's definitely understandable. But coming from the other point of view, why do they think that they know your story? Is it a them problem, or is it really about the way your stories go?
And what does like somebody do when their whole life story is other people assuming their story? What does that person then do to tell their story? Do they get caught up on the fact that everybody's misidentifying them, or do they just say let bygones be bygones, which is rare, you know?
Some people, I feel like they wear their story on their sleeve.
Yeah.
Like their story is who they are, they wear it. Other people, they're kind of themselves, but where they come from, the story that they've gone through isn't always apparent when you meet that person. So it's a matter of, does your upbringing, does your story shape you, or are you shaping your story? When people's stories are shaping them, that's why it's so easy to assume what their story is, because, oh, I've seen this story before, or you're shaped this way, I've seen someone else shaped that way because of this story. So because you're shaped the same way, you must have the same story. I know your story. Are you shaping your own story in a way that you want people to see? And are you making it visible if you do want them to see it?
Now what if telling your story directly threatens somebody else's story? So by you telling them what you've experienced through your eyes, it undoes what they said they went through their eyes. Do you then try not to tell your story because...
Well, how do you really know that unless you say it?
True, but what if like you constantly see people reacting negatively to hearing one story that conflicts with their story? Because there can only be one truth. When you have one group that really, really believes in one truth and the other one that sees that that truth is not true, and you try to explain, they cause a conflict. So what do you do?
So I'm gonna kind of rebuttal. I need to clarify, like, you say there's one truth.
Thank you to all of those who are interviewed, as well as all of those artistic contributors to this episode of Saturation. In order of appearance, Ezra Ali-Low, Jordan, Meron Afutu, better known as Kalu, Heba Shiban, Becca Khalil, Adrian Pach, Desiree, Adam Moledina, Rosa Clemens-Hines, The Pollen Project, Meron Afutu, Julian Jefferson, and Daniel Walsh, better known as D-Dub.
Well, I met you at the blood bank. We were looking at the bags, wondering if any other color matched any other names we knew on the tag.